Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to LACin Talks from the Latin America and Caribbean Investment Network. My name is John Bosek. I am the Director of Research and Strategy at Invest Puerto Rico, which is the investment promotion agency for the island of Puerto Rico. I'm an economist, for those who don't know me, and I'm a proud member of this network, along with Alan and the other secretaries. Today we have a very interesting talk with Andrés Servín-Pont from CRIES, which is the Coordinación Regional de Investigaciones Económicas y Sociales, the Regional Economic and Social Research Coordination. Before he starts, I want to hand it over to Alan, who's gonna say a few words. Alan?
Thank you, John, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for participating in the first LACin Talks, CRIES edition. LACin Talks will be monthly, quick virtual meetings that will receive representatives of international organizations related to sustainability and investments. After each event, the LACin group will discuss and elaborate a document, a one-page document, with synergies to be sent to the guests of each edition. So I invite everyone to participate. I would like to say thank you to all LACin members involved, especially to Muriel, who led this interlocution with Cries, Andrei, and Fermin. And I would like to say a special thank you for Andrei and Fermin and Cries for this cooperation that starts. I hope we can develop many activities together. And today we received our member from the country number 20. So we are growing fast, Andrei. So I hope we can develop some synergies together. Thank you very much for your cooperation, or participation today. And I wish you all an excellent event. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Andrei to talk a little bit about CRIES. And after his presentation, we'll open up for some questions at the end of the presentation, and then maybe talk about some of the cooperation and coordination between this network and the Coordinación Regional de Investigación Económica y Social. So without further preamble, Andrei, I pass it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Muriel. Thank you, everybody that's here joining us today. Well, as mentioned, my name is Andrés Servín-Pont. I am the president of CRIES. We are a regional organization that was originally established in 1982 in Nicaragua. So we've been around for a while, and as an organization, we've also changed quite a bit over time. Originally, it worked as a sub-regional NGO focused on a diversity of issues relating to human rights and conflict prevention, focusing specifically on Central America. Over time, that geographical mandate expanded to include the Caribbean and then the north of South America, and eventually we were a Latin American Caribbean organization. We've had our executive committee based in Nicaragua, in Panama, in Caracas, Venezuela, and currently we're based out of Buenos Aires. But we have a regional network with members all over the region. So all over Latin America and the Caribbean, we have members that are either institutional or at a personal level, and with a very diverse profile. Generally, there's a lot of NGOs, there's a lot of research centers, there's a lot of academics working at individual level in partnership with us. We have a lot of people that, of course, because of the typical revolving door within civil society, academia, and government, that sometimes are also in government position now. And overall, we try and focus on creating better conditions and supporting the work of civil society and academia across Latin America and the Caribbean, which means that our central mandate has to do with supporting those main areas in whichever way we can. And we will get to how we're doing that currently. But those organizations are usually independent, so they're not depending on us. They join us through different projects that we have within CRIES. So that allows us to have a very peculiar model as a regional think tank. That is what we consider ourselves nowadays. Because while we do have a small executive committee working out of Buenos Aires, we are mostly dependent on this large network of members. And as we push forward with new projects, we integrate them into those projects. But at the same time, that doesn't mean we have a huge permanent staff, but we're working on a project by project basis, right? And currently, the core of CRIES is under three main pillars. One is what we call the knowledge production pillar, and it's our more academic area. And there we have our academic journal that comes out every 6 months and has different thematic themes, but generally it's linked to issues regarding international affairs, security, development, human rights, migration, conflict prevention, these types of areas. Under this structure, we also have we also publish books. Usually it's one or two per year in relatively close thematic areas as well. And this area also has a group of researchers that have been associated with CRIES, and as well as an academic council that help us support the guidance of the research and knowledge production area. There's also some instances of convening, especially when discussing new projects or ideas for new publications and such. The other pillar, and this is also another historical pillar in CRIES, is the civil society pillar in terms of supporting the work of organizations that are working on the ground. So us, we're kind of like middlemen in a lot of the international processes that go on in supporting civil society organizations. We're not a grassroots, on the ground civil society organization, typical NGO working with migrants on the border or something like that. We don't do that kind of work. A lot of our members do. So what we try and do is facilitate the conditions for them to be able to better access funding, partnerships, and associates or allies that can help them strengthen their capacities. And we do that through convening. We help generate networks via in-person convenings. We do that by supporting their activities in the fundraising efforts. And we also try to facilitate the connections between them and large potential donors. Many of those donors are usually either philanthropy in the United States or foreign cooperation in Europe. And sometimes there's also other governmental instances, like maybe State Department in the States and things like that. But mostly it's private philanthropy and European cooperation that support these types of initiatives. And then the third pillar, which is our most recent pillar, is our innovation and technology pillar. So for the last few years, and Fermin here has been key in this process, we've decided that the environment in which we're working is rapidly evolving. And a lot of the tools that are being integrated either into the private sector or governmental sector are not necessarily reaching civil society organizations and academia as fast as they should. And a lot of this is mainly technological tools that are out there, are available. It's just that sometimes they're perceived as inaccessible or expensive or inadequate tools. So what we've done is we've created the space within CRIES, and we've created a specific hub that tackles this within CRIES. And from there, we try to get our memberships to better understand what technologies are out there that are available, how we can facilitate them access to it, how we can help them partner up with organizations that can provide this technology, and walk them through many times these processes. Part of this has to do with, for example, projects in which we utilize open source intelligence. For those that are not familiar with open source intelligence, it's basically the exploitation of online freely available information. So, for example, we have one project in which we use these open source methodologies to scrape the web for incidents of use or theft or seizure of illegal firearms. And then that information is processed and it's put into a database, and then that database has a geospatial representation, and that provides a researcher, a policymaker, a policy informer, or anybody interested with a tool, an analytical tool to better understand the issue of illegal weapons trade, right? So that's one of we try to teach our membership how do you conduct open source research, being that it's a freely accessible tool that can really strengthen your work in a multiplicity of ways. We've also been working a lot with artificial intelligence integration. So this same project that I was mentioning, for example, nowadays it's working off an AI platform that we developed along with a US-based company and our partners over at FAU, which is Florida International University. So now the scraping is being done by artificial intelligence, and our researchers are now focused mainly on helping curate and edit the data before it goes into the database, right? To provide a level of verification that's human-led. So we try and teach as well our memberships. I know there's a lot of scare around AI, but there's also a huge potential, and it's accessible. We were able to integrate it into a project. Other people can integrate it into a project, and sometimes we do this through these big projects in which they actively participate as researchers or something like that. And sometimes it's through smaller things, right? Like we teach them how to customize their own GPTs so their communications department can have an easier job when posting online on their social media, right? And reduce costs for having a sustained online profile. Or using Claude to process their concept notes that they're going to be presenting to a potential donor. So we try and work at this technological innovation at multiple levels. And you may have noticed that I've been speaking a lot more about this third pillar than the other two. And it is because nowadays, this is what's becoming our main bread and butter. Doing this part in which we're trying to transmit this knowledge into our civil society partners. And then the other side of it, which is key, is that now we're engaging more and more with the private sector in ways that we weren't doing before. So many years, our main partners were philanthropic organizations or international cooperation. Now we're talking to technology companies that are willing to help us by providing this technology to these organizations, right? So this company, Electrify AI, working out of New Jersey, helping us out with the small arms and light weapons. We have Simplify Next working out of Singapore that's helping us put the AI model for another project that also integrates this technology. Globant, Google, Meta, all these companies now, they're being a lot more proactive within their social responsibility structures, but also overall their outreach and engagement strategies to help civil society bring along these tools, because of course there's a huge potential there, right? So for us, it's also been a very important learning process in which we've had to not only shift the focus of how do we strengthen the civil society organizations and how do we bring that institutional mandate from the 20th century to the 21st century, but it also has meant that now we're engaging with a more diverse group of actors and partners and potential allies than we were before. And this means that, there's been all types of challenges. It's not just about talking with the social responsibility lead on a certain company, but sometimes we have Sophia, who's lead on one of our projects with AI, talking to the engineers that are in Singapore, trying to explain to them, her coming from political science, to the engineers in Singapore, the importance of mapping out instances of human rights violations of indigenous communities, right? So there's also that learning process of bridging those gaps. And those gaps can be language, can be time zone, they can be just the type of education that you received. If you come political science, if you're coming from engineering, cultural experiences, there's a lot of elements there, right? And to keep it short and not go way over time, right now, this transformation process is what's keeping us motivated to try to further continue to expand how we relate ourselves to a diversity of actors, right? So we want to engage more with the private sector. We want to engage more with governments in different instances. We want to show that all the potential that's here, because now what's also happening is that these technological applications that we're developing, sometimes they end up working as pilots to test technology that then is of interest to other people like in the private sector, right? So there's also this growth potential in terms of developing the technological applications that for us is very interesting. And that means that now we're also understanding our relationships with the technology sector, not just in terms of, hey, what type of technology can you transfer to us and can you support us with, but also how beneficial can this relationship be mutually in terms of us testing out the technology and then being able to transfer knowledge onto you in regards to its application and its development, right? Lastly, because this usually comes up when we talk about this, while our CRIES is mainly focused on these areas that I mentioned, we've also had a lot of work in the past that's linked to providing consulting for different, mostly either private sector or government, right? And the consulting usually has to do with either political or geopolitical risk. And this is something that we handle a bit more on the side because it doesn't go hand in hand with the historical institutional mandate of CRIES, but it is a very demanded capacity that we have, and that we usually, and it ends up usually developing quite a lot of links with private sector and governments overall. So that is something that we keep on our radar and that we do engage a lot with, specifically the national level political risk analysis or providing insights on geopolitical risk in Latin America. Maybe I stop there for a bit and open it up to questions. I don't know, Alan, John, it's up to you guys.
No, excellent. Thank you, Andre. Very interesting. Any questions? You could just put it in the chat, and I'll go through the questions. We have one here from Moriel. I want to ask about the events that you guys have planned in the future, to know if the members of this network, the Latin America and Caribbean Investment Network, can also participate. For example, she mentions one in Panama. So maybe you could talk a little about some of the events that you guys have planned in the near future.
Yeah, of course. So CRIES, at least once a year, we convene our civil society partners somewhere in Latin America. Many times it's Panama because, well, we are legally a Panamanian organization and it's a great hub, right? Everybody's happy because they get direct flights and hotels are nice and everything. So usually it works out well. We have one that will either be the end of this year or beginning of the next one, most likely beginning of 2025. Not sure if we're going to do it in Panama or somewhere in the Caribbean. So, of course, that's going to be even more appealing to many. Yes,
Puerto Rico. You could always come to Puerto Rico.
We'll look into Puerto Rico. That could actually be a great option because there's good flight options to Puerto Rico. So, yeah, we're looking into that. And that is a space that we usually either open up, sometimes in observer roles, but also now with all this work that we're doing in the innovation sector, we're opening it up a lot to engage with people in the private sector, for example, right? So we're always open to ideas because it is a very broad agenda that they handle, and that is usually our big event of the year that we host. Then we usually have a lot other more specific activities, like Fermin and I are heading out to the United States in 2 weeks. 3 weeks, yeah, about so, yeah. And I saw somebody say that there's an FIU alum here. Well, we're gonna be stopping by FIU, and then we're gonna head to DC, and then we're gonna do New York. And those types of trips are usually not so much about convening, but rather us contacting all these potential partners that we want to engage with. And this is the first time that most of those partners are not so much like your traditional donor philanthropic organizations that you have in the United States, but a lot of them are more, tech companies and things like this. So it's, for us, it's a bit of a new experience as well that's coming up.
Awesome. Another question, what for you guys does a successful partnership look like? What is the usual way that you guys engage with some of the partner organizations, either philanthropic, private sector? What does that usually look like in terms of a partnership? Is it project based? Is it based more on a timeline? How does a successful partnership look like for you guys?
By design, we're an organization that's very project oriented, right? So And that has to do also with the context in which we operate. 20 years ago, CRIES was an organization that was receiving core funding that doesn't exist anymore for a sector. So our economic model is based on projects, right? Which doesn't mean that we're not proactively engaged with organizations which we don't have projects with, but with which we develop long-lasting relations that lead to projects, right? So one example has to do with Colombia, Universidad Javeriana and CAS Stiftung over there, right? Both of them are partners that we work with in the academic sector quite a bit. We produce multiple books a year with them. We have convening, we prepare events, right? And that's been a relationship that has lasted for the last 10 years or so. It didn't start off as project based, and we've continued to build the relationship, and now it's just there's an interinstitutional synergy that just makes our cooperation very easy, right? I think that usually projects help bring together the organizations, mainly because it forces all parts to agree on one or more goals that we want to complete, right? And then from there, leading that to success, I think is usually a very good way to build that interinstitutional synergy. And then after that, you can have an instance in which, like the one I'm describing with Universidad Javeriana in Colombia, in which, well, we've had successful projects. We can continue to cooperate with each other, and eventually, more projects will come out. We'll have more success stories to share.
Thank you. I have another question here. What specific school at FIU are you working with? And do you have a list of the open data sources that you most use?
So with FIU, we work with the Jack Gordon Institute for Public Policy. We've had a relationship with them for quite a few years now. And with them, we've developed specifically that small arms and light weapons project that we've collected data for the last 3 years. Yes, and all the data that we use being open source is actually accessible. What I usually suggest there is all the sources are on the dashboard per se, right? So each individual incident, and I'm looking up here the link so I can share it. That is, for example, that dashboard. And if you click on any of the incidents that you find on the dashboard, you will find the original source of the information. Now, that information is obtained via a specific methodology designed for scraping the web, right? So there's one thing is the source per se, but another thing is how we got to that source. And how we got to that source is through a methodology that we developed specifically for scraping the web that then was taught to the AI model, so it would emulate us doing that scraping because before it was a manual scraping, right? But yes, I'm a very big proponent of open source research in general. I just think that it gives a certain level of transparency to the work that one is doing. It also it creates the foundation for future cooperation or development of the research, right? Because tomorrow somebody can pick up our dashboard, and get the full data set and overlay it with, I don't know, a data set that they built with homicides across Latin America. And that overlay might provide a lot more insight than just my dashboard alone, right? So, but that can be done because we're working with open source, because we're willing to integrate that information and share that information. So big proponents of everything that is open source. I think it just provides a lot of potential for continuous development beyond our own institutional and human capabilities.
Thank you. There's another question here about knowledge transfer. How do you find the best way to transfer the knowledge that you guys put together to private sector partners or other partners? How do you do that knowledge transfer generally?
So that's something that we've been working on lately, and it's still, I think that we're still trying out what is the best way to handle that. The partnerships, and I'm going to bring our partnership with one of the AI companies that we work with. The initial agreement was that they'd create the model and they would be able to pilot the technology in order to then showcase that technology, right? So a lot of the work has been just in cooperation and providing the feedback, and has developed a dynamic between the two organizations, in which, of course, we all benefit from it. A lot of the knowledge transfer that we work with is many times more focused on the end users of the technology we're trying to pass on to civil society organizations, right? In which we're trying to make sure that they're utilizing these elements to strengthen their own capacities. And we do this through online training. We do this through in-person convening and in-person training. We're doing this as well with some not printed, but like written materials that we want to start passing on. One thing that I don't know, Fermin, if we can still talk about this yet, but I'll mention it anyways. I think we'll be safe. We're figuring out right now a way in which, for example, people that are in Venezuela can have access to a single, simple guideline to utilizing social media, considering the conditions that they're in right now, right? With the repressive government and everything that's going on. So how do we make it simple for an everyday cell phone user to figure out how to set up their VPN, how to make sure that they're being maintaining their cyber hygiene and not overexposing themselves, how to make sure they're not exposing others, all these kinds of things. So I think that it's very many times these processes of transferring knowledge are very ad hoc, and they really depend on what your final target and objective is.
Awesome, thank you. I think one last question. So, most of the members of the network here are either investment promotion agencies, organizations that are dedicated to economic development, or regional chambers of commerce. Are there any projects or specific areas that CRIES works on that you think would be a natural starting point for us to engage, or for our member groups to engage with you guys?
So one thing that I've been talking a lot about with my team is we noticed that there's a lot of smaller and medium-sized companies in different parts of the world that are willing to engage with civil society, that are willing to engage with academia, to develop their technology, to implement it, to showcase it, right? And that builds a very interesting relationship between civil society, academia, and the private sector that I think is still underexploited in Latin America, and that could be very well utilized, right? So, when we talk to potential technology partners in Latin America, we're usually going, it's like, hey, let's talk to Google Cloud, right? Because there's leads here. But there's a lot of companies out there that are doing that are smaller companies that we should try and figure out how to engage with. And I think that the partnerships could be immensely beneficial from that perspective, right? The other part that I think is interesting to keep in mind is, especially when we're talking about promotion of investments, what we see when we're working with partners in the consulting sphere, with partners that are from outside Latin America, is their preoccupation and their concerns, right? They want to know about the political instability in the country that they're getting themselves into. They want to better understand what is the potential effect of conflictivity in certain regions over their interests, right? So, I don't know, we've been working a lot with a project until recently that was called Monitores Equivo, in which we were monitoring potential conflictivity between Venezuela and Guyana over their border dispute. A lot of the consultations that we were receiving on that side were from maritime companies, right? They were preoccupied that if conflict did explode there, how would that affect trade in the Caribbean? How long could that trade be disrupted? Would military operations? So there's all these concerns that are related, and maybe these weren't companies or partners that were necessarily thinking about investing in Venezuela, but did have vested interest in the impact that affected trading routes could have on them, right? So I think that there's also a niche to exploit in terms of figuring out, we're very supportive of trying to attract investment. but we also have to understand that a lot of the investment that we're trying to attract, they're also coming to the region and then trying to figure out like, okay, this all looks great. What's the risk side to it, right? So I think that could also be a point of potential cooperation as well.
Interesting. Fermin, I see that you raised your hand.
Yeah, thank you, John. Just to add a little information on what Andre was saying, well, I have over 10 years now of experience in public affairs, working with multinational companies in the private sector. And one thing I noticed is sometimes companies that are looking on their planning, their CSR work, they get stuck when it comes to what type of NGO or partner you will need. As Andre said at the beginning, we have a network all over the continent, basically, all Latin America and the Caribbean, that allow us to, if any of you guys need help, to help you choose, ping, to vet some of the organizations that you are considering. That is a work that it's truly very tough to do when you're in the private sector and you actually want to do some good with your business. And that's something that we can really help out with. And that's a knowledge that we have and it's accessible.
Thank you. I think that's a good. We have one more question here from Mauricio. Given CRIES' extensive network, what would be the key considerations to ensure collaboration in our brand new network? And I think this is a good inflection point also to mention some exciting news that we are going to formalize the cooperation between the Latin America Caribbean Investment Network and CRIES. And, we're also going to be, from our end, convoking a lot of the members of this network to think about and brainstorm some synergies to come and share potential synergies to then come and share back with you guys so that we create kind of a two-way street in terms of the collaboration. So I think that's a good next step and exciting news from both ends in terms of formalizing the collaboration. So any closing thoughts from either Andre or Fermin in terms of how you can potentially see this collaboration evolving, and we can take it from there.
So I think that some of the potential we discovered, but I do think that this space specifically, and I appreciate having proposed the space, is a good way to get started, right? Because many times when we're talking about collaboration, until you put, faces to the names, it gets very difficult until you actually start having some interactions and start, ping-ponging some ideas. It's hard to get the ball rolling. So this is a great first instance to start any type of collaboration. I think that given the profile, the profiles of our institutions and organizations, there's a lot of potential. It's just a matter of identifying like what are the key strategic areas that we have and that we end up sharing. And from there, I feel it'll be relatively easy to at least find 1, 2, or 3 specific subject areas in which we are willing to proactively engage with and let those develop into projects or joint initiatives that then start building that relationship up.
Perfect. No, that sounds like a great start to the relationship. And like I said, I think we have some next steps from our end at the network to kind of do some brainstorming, and then there could be an additional convening with you guys to share some of the ideas on potential synergies. So, de nuevo, gracias. Thank you so much for your time. Alan, I don't know if you want to have any closing remarks to kind of send us off, but I think this has been a very nice first LACin Talks. So, Alan, I'll pass it over to you.
Andre, thank you very much. It was amazing. We will discuss internally how to proceed. I have thought things about smart contracts and also about frugal innovation. So let's organize it and discuss with others. But I'm quite excited about this relationship that we are starting. Thank you very much, Fermin, too. thank you for being here today as well. So wish you all the best in life and see you soon.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's been a pleasure.
It's great
Bye
seeing
bye.
everybody. Thank you again. And we'll be sharing the video with the full network on the LinkedIn page. And if you're not friends with the network on the LinkedIn page, then I invite you to go and follow and become and join connect with the LinkedIn page. So thank you.
Can we take a picture? Thank you.
Sure.
Let's take a picture.
Yeah, definitely. Great, Pamela. Let's do it.
Can you do it? Alan, I'm not in my computer now.
Okay.
Okay, I could do it. Let's see.
Yeah.
Okay, I just took the picture, and I'll share it with the network.
Great.
Thanks, everybody.
Guys. Bye
Thank you.
bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Hablamos.